This is all that I've ever been to you.
Now that we've been looking at the video recording of Gypsy Rose Blanchard in a fit of domestic violence with a blanket and a pair of steel fabric cutting shears, let's take another look at the felony information from the trial of the murder of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. I've long held the belief that Gypsy participated in the desecration of her mother's corpse, if not in the actual act of the murder itself, and here's why. The felony information filed when both Nicholas Godejohn and Gypsy were listed as co-defendants in first-degree murder charges by the state of Missouri shows that they were charged with the death caused by stabbing and cutting, filed July 2015. Then, on July 5, 2016, Gypsy signs a plea agreement removing her as a co-defendant in the first-degree murder charge and giving her a second-degree murder conviction. Then, amended felony information is filed by the prosecutor's office, removing Gypsy as a co-defendant, leaving only Nick as sole defendant in the first-degree armed action counts, with the cause of death now listed as just stabbing, filed November 2018. When Gypsy and Nick are co-defendants, the cause of death is cutting and stabbing, and when Gypsy is removed as a defendant, so is cutting as a cause of death. It is my belief that the prosecution's theory at trial was to be that Gypsy did participate in the actual murder of her mother, and they were going to put it forth that Nick was the one who caused the stab wounds and that Gypsy was the one who caused the cutting or incised wounds. Listen to the full witness testimony of the medical examiner at trial in the state's direct and, for Godejohn's defense, cross-examination of the same witness. Pay attention to the differentiation of types of wounds, because it was going to matter when there were two defendants. Even though stabbing was the only cause of death that Godejohn was charged with and convicted of in this trial.
How are you? Good. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in the cause now pending before the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a seat. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name?
Thomas J. Vandenberg.
And could you maybe spell your last name for the record?
It is Vandenberg.
Sir, what is your current occupation?
I am the Chief Forensic Investigator with the Greene County Medical Examiner's Office.
In general, what is the Greene County Medical Examiner's Office?
The Medical Examiner's Office is tasked by statute with investigating any sudden unexpected death or any death that is suspicious or caused by any kind of violence.
What are your current duties right now as Chief Forensic Investigator?
As the Chief Forensic Investigator, I supervise the 4 other investigators in the office. I assist with autopsies, I do death scene investigations, and I do the administrative paperwork side of the office also.
How long have you been Chief Forensic Investigator?
17 years.
Before being the Chief Investigator, did you work for the Medical Examiner's Office in another capacity?
Yes, I was an investigator for 4 years before becoming the Chief Investigator.
Was that pretty much the same duties without all the supervisor stuff?
It was actually mostly on-call, part-time. I also worked as a paramedic at that time.
And where did you work as a paramedic?
I worked my last 5 years as a paramedic here in Springfield for Mercy Hospital.
Where did you start your career as a paramedic?
I started in Sioux City, Iowa. I obtained EMT and then EMT intermediate and paramedic training through Western Iowa Tech Community College. Worked in Sioux City, worked in Southern California, Nebraska, Montana, and then back to Iowa before moving here.
And how many total years did you work as a paramedic?
20 years.
What is your educational background?
I have an associate's degree in police science. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, and I have a master's degree in forensic science.
Did you initially receive some specialized training to become a paramedic?
Yes.
And what was that training?
That training was, it's a 1,200-hour paramedic training curriculum that includes classroom and practical training in emergency medicine, anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, and everything to do with working as a paramedic in pre-hospital care.
Then did you receive specialized training specifically in investigating death scenes?
Yes.
And what was that?
In January 1996, I attended the St. Louis University Medical Legal Death Investigation Training course. I also, later in 1996, attended the Medical Legal Death Investigation Training course put on by the State Medical Examiner in Iowa, which is where I was working at the time. And then I've taken multiple continuing education trainings in all different aspects of forensic investigation.
And do you have any certifications?
I am certified as a fellow by the American Board of Medical Legal Death Investigators.
As a forensic investigator, is it fair to say that your duties can be split up between investigation on scene and then assistance during autopsies?
Yes.
Can you describe what is it that you do as an investigator in general when you're actually on the scene?
At the death scene, we are summoned typically by law enforcement who is already there. Initially, on arrival, we make contact with the lead investigator from law enforcement, get a summary of what's going on. We start taking photographs of the outside of the scene, and then photograph as we go into the scene, gather all the information we can about the deceased, and then we observe and record what we see at the scene, and then do a examination of the deceased, and then package the deceased for transportation for autopsy if that's required.
Then when you are assisting in an autopsy, what are your duties?
When I assist with the autopsy, typically it's myself and the forensic pathologist. I get the body out, weigh the body, get all the containers and everything set up for the autopsy. Then I take the photographs during the autopsy. I assist with measurements and weighing and documentation as directed by the pathologist. And then I also assist the pathologist in opening the body, removing the organs for their examination.
As the forensic pathologist is conducting the autopsy, are you also personally observing what, if any, injuries may be present?
Yes. The pathologist is on one side of the table, I'm on the other, and we're working together.
And does that include both the injury, if present, on the surface level of the body, as well as any damage that may be caused internally?
Yes.
And has your training and experience allowed you to become familiar with human anatomy?
Yes.
Which specific training?
All the way through EMT and paramedic training, death investigation training. In my forensic master's degree, we had 2 forensic pathology courses that went heavily into anatomy and physiology of the body.
And then has a portion of your training experience also been on being able to determine what mechanisms cause certain injuries?
Yes.
In which specific parts of your training?
And mechanism of injury was very important in pre-hospital care and paramedic training because you had to anticipate injuries that didn't show up right away by examining the mechanism of injury and what could possibly be injured that you don't see right away.
I'd like to call your attention to the early morning hours of June 15th of 2015. Were you called out to 2103 West Volunteer Way?
Yes, I was.
Can you describe what initially brought you to that location?
I was called by the sheriff's office with the information that there was a homicide at that location.
When you arrived on scene, about what time of day or night was it?
I arrived on the scene shortly before 2 a.m.
Fair to say there were a lot of police and other personnel there?
Yes.
When you first arrived on scene, what were some of the first things that you did?
I met with Detective Stanley, who was the lead investigator at the scene, got a synopsis of what was happening, that there was a deceased female, that they had gone into the residence, done their initial observations, but had not touched the body at that point. At that point, we put on protective clothing, a Tyvek suit, boot covers, gloves, photographed the external area of the scene, and then we entered through the front door of the residence.
Once you were inside the residence, what did you do?
Took photographs going through of the kitchen, dining area, living room, bathroom, and another bedroom that the door was open, and then started photographing into the room where the decedent was.
And did you later learn her name was Claudine Blanchard?
Yes.
Once you were in the room where Ms. Blanchard's body was, how did you conduct your investigation?
We start from the doorway, noting the condition of the room, what lights are or aren't on, position of furniture, position of other items around the room, and then work into the body, observing the body in the position found, and with, in this case, the coverings, the bed coverings, covering most of the body.
Did you ultimately observe any injuries?
Yes. As we went up to the actual body, there were several defects which appeared from sharp injury through the back of the clothing. She was laying face down on the bed. Arms were up with hands kind of underneath her face, and there was blood saturating the back of the nightgown that she was wearing, and blood also on the bed.
Once you made those observations, then what was the next thing you did?
And then once we moved the bedding down, moved the clothing up, we did observe several apparent stab wounds across the upper back.
Yeah. Aside from the injuries that you've talked about, was there anything else that you could determine about the condition of Ms. Blanchard's body?
Rigor mortis was passing, which takes 24 to 36 hours for rigor mortis to be firm and then start to pass after 24 to 36 hours. Her rigor mortis was passing. Her face and the dependent level of her body, the front, was very dark, and the skin was starting to slip when we moved her body, which is another indication that death had been at least 36 hours prior.
Then did you eventually make arrangements to have Ms. Blanchard's body transported for autopsy?
Yes, we rolled her over, looked for other injuries, secured her in a body bag. We put a identification tag on the left ankle at the scene, and then we put a locking seal on the body bag. We, at this scene, had another investigator who came out with the van, and we transported her to the medical examiner's office at that point.
Is that then when her autopsy was conducted?
Her autopsy was conducted, I believe we started just before 1 o'clock that same day in the afternoon.
In general, I should have asked this earlier, what is an autopsy?
An autopsy is a complete examination of the body used to determine the cause of death and help to determine the manner of death.
Did you assist in Ms. Blanchard's autopsy?
Yes, I did.
Who was the medical examiner or a forensic pathologist?
Dr. Jeff Harkey was the medical examiner at that point.
And was there anyone else present during the autopsy besides yourself and Dr. Harkey?
Yes, there were detectives from the Greene County Sheriff's Office that were present at the autopsy.
In a case like this of a suspected homicide, is that unusual to have law enforcement there while you're doing the autopsy?
No, that is standard, that law enforcement attends any autopsy for a suspicious death.
Prior to examining Ms. Blanchard's injuries, did you do some preliminary evidence collection?
Once the body bag is open and we put evidence bags on the hands at the scene, those bags are removed one at a time, the hands are photographed. We did collect all the specimens for a sexual assault kit, which is standard in a homicide that we do that. That included clipping the nails, swabs of the mouth, vaginal swabs and rectal swabs, and combings and pulled hairs, both pubic and head hairs.
And specifically with the swabbing of the mouth, what's that called?
It's a buccal swab, and it's a swab that we just rub the inside of the cheek for any DNA material that may be there.
And in your experience, is that type of swab of the cheek typical to obtain a sample of that person's own DNA?
Yes.
Now, when you were collecting the swabs from Ms. Blanchard, what did you do with them after you had collected them?
I collected the swabs and handed them directly to one of the detectives from the sheriff's office, who then packaged those and collected the whole kit.
Did you make any preliminary observations on the clothing of Ms. Blanchard?
She was wearing a nightgown, and it had multiple holes in the back and a few holes on the side, I believe.
Then after the preliminary examination, did you go ahead and examine Ms. Blanchard's body for injury?
Yes.
And did you photograph that process?
Yes, I did. First, show you what has been marked as State's Exhibits 13 through 18. If you could just take a second and look at those. Do you recognize those? Yes. What are they? Those are photographs from the scene of Ms. Blanchard as she was found in her bed and then packaged in a body bag.
And do the images of Ms. Blanchard in those photographs fairly and accurately depict how she looked when you saw her?
Yes.
Then I'm going to show you what I have marked as State's Exhibits 36 through 41, if you could take a moment and look through those. Do you recognize those?
Yes.
What are they?
Those are photographs taken at the autopsy of Ms. Blanchard.
And do they fairly and accurately reflect how she looks during the autopsy?
Yes.
And then lastly, State's Exhibit 42, do you recognize what that is?
That is a short form Missouri death certificate.
And is that for Claudine Blanchard?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, the State would seek to admit State's Exhibits 13 through 18.
No objection.
Be received without objection.
And admissions of 36 through 42.
No objection, Your Honor.
Be received without objection.
Your Honor, due to the sensitive nature of these photographs, may I publish them by giving each juror their own packet that has a copy of them rather than show them on the screen?
Yes. Are you going to have the witness describing the those here?
Yes, sir. And you can refer to your copy if that's okay. What are we looking at here and what's already been admitted as State's Exhibit 1?
That is the outside front of Ms. Blanchard's residence with a vehicle parked in the driveway beside it.
And then flipping to the next page, what's depicted in State's Exhibit 12?
That is the view into Ms. Blanchard's bedroom from the doorway.
Flipping to the next page, what's in State's Exhibit 13?
And that is a closer image of Ms. Blanchard as she was found from the right side.
Flipping to the next page.
And that was the photograph taken from the left side, from beside the bed of Ms. Blanchard.
And looking in State's Exhibit 14, is that blood basically that's kind of soaked there through her nightgown?
Yes, the back of the nightgown was saturated and was mostly dried at the time that I saw it.
And it looks like there then that pink sheet lower than that, and then ultimately the comforter also had some blood.
Yes.
Other than that, did you observe any kind of blood that flew onto the walls or anything like that?
Not that I observed. When I was there, it was early morning and we were in suboptimal lighting conditions.
And what is that called when blood kind of projects from the body?
Cast off, when an item is withdrawn that has blood on it, blood is cast off of that item. And blood spatter is the overall forensic field of looking at the blood evidence left at the scene.
Then flipping to State's Exhibit 15, what are we looking at?
That is the initial lifting the back of the nightgown to see some of the wounds on Ms. Blanchard's back.
State's Exhibit 16, flipping to the next page, what is that?
That is a large wound on the back of the neck. And you also have wounds on the right side of the neck that are visible in this picture also.
Then flipping to the next page, State's Exhibit 17, what is that?
That is after we were able to move Ms. Blanchard onto a body bag onto the other side of the bed to prepare for transporting her. The locking seal has been placed on the body bag, and her name and the autopsy number were written on the back.
And then flipping to State's Exhibit 18, what are we looking at there?
That is a close-up of the locking seal that shows the individual number for that seal. Each seal has its own unique number.
And fair to say what we just looked at, Exhibits 13 through 18 were all pictures that were taken at the scene.
Yes.
Now, going back for a moment to the autopsy, when it came time to inspect the body of Ms. Blanchard for injury,
Yes.
Were you there personally present?
Yes, I was.
And did you personally observe each injury on the external part of her body?
Yes.
Did you personally observe what, if any, damage those external injuries caused to the inside of her body?
I did.
In general, what type of injuries did Ms. Blanchard have?
She had both stab wounds and incised or cutting wounds.
How many stab wounds did she have?
She had 17 stab wounds.
And how many incised wounds?
There were 2 large incised wounds, but they appeared to have been a series of cuts to cause those 2 large wounds.
Given which general part of her body were the stab wounds to?
The stab wounds were primarily over the upper back. There was 1 stab wound on the right side, and there was 1 stab wound just above the collarbone on the right side on the front, and 2 in the back of the head.
Now, of the wounds on the neck, you mentioned that there were both stab wounds and those incised wounds.
Yes.
Based on your training and experience, what causes an incised wound?
A sharp object drawn across in a cutting motion to cause a large cut injury.
If we flip to the next page, which is State's Exhibit 36, what are we looking at there?
That is the body bag at the autopsy, showing that the locking seal is still intact, and we have added the autopsy number little scale that we put in all the photographs taken at autopsy.
Then if you flip the page, what are we looking at in State's Exhibit 37?
That is the incised wound on the back of the neck to the left side of the page, and on the right side of the page is the large incised wound to the right side of the neck, which in this photograph there are several wounds that look like they run together into one large wound on the right side.
And specifically, kind of up there towards the top, that more circular wound, what type is that?
It appears that that was a stab wound, and there were 2 stab wounds to the back of the head, just right at the top of the neck.
And in your training and experience, would those be caused by a different mechanism than the incised wounds?
Well, a stabbing is a puncture going straight in or at an angle, but to just puncture the skin and hit whatever's underneath as opposed to the cutting motion of a incised wound.
And then if you flip the page, State's Exhibit 38, what do we see in this picture?
In this picture, it shows the both wounds, the large incised wounds, but it also does show there is a stab wound behind the right ear, at the back of the head, just at the top of the neck, and then also the larger incised wound on the right side of the neck.
And then if we flip the page to State's Exhibit 39, what is this picture focusing on?
This shows multiple superficial wounds on the right side of the neck going down towards the shoulder, and it shows the clear forked tails in that large wound on the right that indicate it was several cutting motions for that wound. The other wounds on the right are very superficial and just one peeled some superficial skin, and several of them are just scratches.
Now, in regard to the incised wound on the back of the neck, were you able to tell how deep that was?
That wound did go all the way into where it was in contact with the bone of the cervical spine, and it contacted that between the 6th and 7th cervical vertebrae.
And how about the depth of the incised wound on the side?
The wound on the right side also went down to the cervical spine until it contacted the bone.
If you flip to State's Exhibit 40, what is this a photograph of?
That is a photograph of Ms. Blanchard's back taken from the right side.
And there are numbers there. What do those signify?
Dr. Harkey numbered each wound, and this shows the numbers 1 through 14 for the stab wounds on the back.
And of those 14 wounds there on the back, were there certain ones that caused significantly more damage than others?
Of these wounds, wound number 3, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 12, and number 14 penetrated into the chest cavity, and a couple of them on into the abdominal cavity of Ms. Blanchard.
And if you go ahead and flip to State's Exhibit 41, what is this exhibit?
This is a photograph that I initialed when I circled those 6 wounds that penetrated into the body cavities and damaged internal structures.
If we start with wound number 3, what was the internal damage caused on that one?
Wound number 3 went into the left side of the chest. It damaged the left lung, went into the pericardial sac, and then went into the left atrium of the heart.
And how about wound number 5?
Wound number 5 went into the left or the right side of the chest and damaged the the right lung, and I believe it may have also penetrated into through the diaphragm and into the liver.
And wound number 6?
Wound number 6 penetrated into the right side of the chest and into the right lung.
Number 7?
Wound number 7 penetrated into the right side of the chest and into the right lung.
Wound number 12?
Wound number 12 penetrated into the chest and into the right lung.
And lastly, number 14.
And number 14 penetrated into the chest, into the right lung, and then I believe it also went through the diaphragm into the liver.
you go ahead and flip to the last page, State's Exhibit 42. Can you describe this exhibit?
This is a copy of the Missouri death certificate for Claudine Blanchard.
And when are these issued?
These are issued after the certifying doctor has enough information to make the determination of the cause and manner of death.
And it says there next to date of death, June 14th of 2015.
Yes.
Is that meant as the actual date of her death?
No, that is actually the date found. When we don't know the specific day of the death, we put on the death certificate the date that the body is found.
And ultimately, what was the listed cause of death?
The cause of death is listed as stab wounds.
Like that moment, Your Honor.
Yeah.
I don't have any further questions. I do. No further questions.
Anything, Mr. Barrett?
Just briefly,
Sir?
my question would be, you can't tell us the order of these stab wounds, is that correct?
That is correct.
You can't tell us the time frame that these stab wounds occur, is that correct?
The stab wounds would appear to be at the time of death. They were very closely within minutes of the time of death. And that certainly appeared to be more than 36 hours from the condition of the body, from the time I examined her early morning on June 15th.
Okay, you can't tell us the time frame as relation to the other injuries. In other words, they all occur in a very short period of time, in your opinion?
Yes, all appeared to have occurred in a very short time.
And almost all of the injuries were on the back, at least all the stab wounds, correct?
Correct.
And there was one stab wound kind of on her, it looks like her right shoulder, kind of on the side or just barely in front.
Yes.
That would be consistent with maybe her lifting up and the process of the stabbing continuing, correct?
It could be that.
And then she had some injuries on her hand.
There was one incised wound on the ring finger of, I believe, the left hand.
And there were stab wounds and incised wounds, correct?
Correct.
And stab wounds would, as you demonstrated earlier, would be the stabbing motion.
Yes.
And incised would be more of a slice or a cut.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned rigor mortis. When does that normally start after one passes away?
Rigor mortis starts to set in within several hours. It's determined by the temperature and activity at the time of death, how soon it really starts. But by 6 to 8 hours, rigor mortis is firm, and after 24 to 36 hours, rigor mortis passes away again.
Okay, and when you say passes away, tell us what that means.
The body is in the position, but when we move an extremity, it doesn't try to go back to that position. It's flaccid once we move.
And your best guess as to time of death would have been about 36 hours before she was found?
That was a minimum. It could have been longer than that.
That's all put by Judge.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused.
Yes, on behalf of the state.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes, Judge.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. You're welcome.